Well, it might have took me getting snowed in to finally try to answer a question that I get probably once, maybe twice a week since I made my Zojirushi bread machine video is how do you do a sourdough in your Zojirushi bread machine? And so, since I was snowed in, I decided to give it a try. And the reason that I'm giving it a try, I'm actually going to do it on two different days in this video, was because I have done a lot of research and it has been very difficult to find a recipe that you can follow in the Zojirushi. Now, I have the Zojirushi Supreme bread machine. It makes a 2 pound loaf. It makes a delicious 2 pound loaf. And in that first video that some of you have loved and asked me questions about, I use Sue Becker's recipe for this machine. I purchased my Zojirushi from the Bread Beckers. It has probably been my number one pick of things that I purchased in 2024 because it was a game changer for me, particularly because I am now working full time out of my home. And it has allowed me to have freshly milled bread for my family when I don't have time to be at home with all the little cozy videos and stretch and folds. That's all great and beautiful, but if you're working, that just doesn't work. You don't have that kind of time, so you need a tool that can help you. And this tool, this bread machine, does just that. And it's fantastic because it's sturdy enough to handle freshly milled grains, which a lot of is a big complaint with a lot of other bread machines is they just can't handle the heft of having freshly milled grain. So that is this machine has lived up to its reputation. There is a newer version of this machine that's more expensive. It's about double the price, and it has a couple little features. But I went with this one because one, it was the one Sue Becker had recommended, and she has both in her store. But she just said this is tried and true. Also, America's Test Kitchen, they have tested this one against the newer one, and again, they come back to this one. They love it. So, as I said, this one is tried and true. It works great. If you're new to bread making, it is foolproof. It is makes it easy, even if you are at home. It doesn't mean you can't ever do a crusty bread and do stretches and folds. I do that sometimes too, but I can't do that on the day to day. And I didn't invest in all of this equipment so that we could just have fresh bread here and there. This is a lifestyle change and an important one because of the health benefits of getting the whole grain, and all the health benefits comes from freshly milling your grains. Now my Whisper Mill is old, and it's one of the original ones. They've got a lot of different ones that are on the market, but this one does the trick. It also came from the Bread Beckers, and I have loved my Whisper Meal. I know there's some newer ones out there, but as they say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I haven't had to, thank the Lord. Mine's still chugging along. So with that, I hope that you will follow this video if you're interested in how to use your sourdough starter with the Zojirushi. I will have a recipe card in the description that you can follow with your Zojirushi. And I tried baking this bread two different ways. I did it one with total freshly milled grain. I used a hard red wheat, and that's the loaf you're seeing right here, and it's beautiful. The second one that I did, I actually blended it. So I did half of the freshly milled hard red wheat, and then I used a little less than half of an all-purpose bread flour. And so we'll see the little bit of the difference in this video. Once you get the yeast in your little well there, you're going to take your machine and lock it down, close the lid, plug it up, and then you're going to follow the prompts on the panel there to choose the right setting. For me, it is a memory 1 that I did following Sue Becker's recommendation of how to program for the 2-pound loaf. And so that's what I did. And then you're also going to go and you're going to pick your crust setting. I always do a medium, and as you can see, it is a beautiful loaf. It rose. The color looks great. It doesn't look burnt. I will say the sides and bottom they always look a little bit darker than the top. So if you want it to be dark like that all over, you'll want the darkest setting for the top. That's kind of up to you. So I'm slicing it open to see what does it look like inside. And it actually has a beautiful crumb. It has a nice mild flavor, so it's not very sour like you would think of a sourdough. Several of you have asked me how to make a sourdough loaf in the Zojirushi, and so there is a function to create a sourdough setting on the Zojirushi, but it is very difficult to find how to use the sourdough to create a loaf of bread in the Zojirushi. Well, that's been my experience. So with the snow that we had, I got out of my refrigerator my nice Kamut 1920 sourdough that I started, and I started feeding it. And so as you saw, I tested this because I just was playing around kind of with the measurements and math to see if I could make a good loaf. Now, the first thing I will say about this is this has not sat for a long period of time to build that really sourness of a sourdough, but it does give you a nice flavor. And so if you want more of a real sour taste, then you would probably have to use the dough function on your Zojirushi. Then take it out and refrigerate it overnight, and then come back to the process the next day and do it that way, because then you would have time for those flavors to build a little bit more and to sour a little bit longer. But that's not what I'm doing because I don't have time for that. Even being snowed in, I'm trying to create something that is attainable for me to do with my busy schedule. So this was the recipe. I will create a recipe card and put it in the description. But I had to decrease the Zojirushi basic recipe because sourdough is moist, so you've got to reduce some of your liquid and flour. And so I just played around with it. I'm not great at math. I mean, I've passed math, but that's just not ever been my strong suit. But I'm a home cook. I'm pretty seasoned, and so I felt like I could kind of play around until I figured it out, and that's what I did. That's how I learned. If I fail, then I fail. But honestly, the first loaf, I was a little nervous, but it turned out. So we're going to do a second loaf, and we're going to see if it turns out. The only difference with this loaf is this has had more feedings. So the first loaf I did had one feeding after being sat in my refrigerator for quite some time. But as you can see, it's a very healthy starter, and it just always bounces back when I get ready to use her. So this is the recipe that I'm gonna follow, and this is the recipe I used last night in the first loaf I did. I took half a cup of fed sourdough starter, 1 1/4 cup of filtered water. When you're dealing with sourdough, you don't want to use tap water, okay? So you need to use a filtered water. So I did 1 1/4 cup of filtered water, 1/3 cup of olive oil, 1/3 cup of honey, 2 teaspoons of salt, 2 tablespoons of lecithin. I said that wrong in a previous video and somebody corrected me. Thank you. And I mean that because we all can improve. And then I had to decrease my flour. Now I use total hard milled freshly milled hard red wheat, and I decreased it to 3 3/4 cup. So, and then at the very top in the well, you'll see 1 teaspoon of active yeast. And so I'm still adding some yeast to it because, again, this is going to be quick to run the normal Zojirushi setting, to put it in, all your ingredients, leave it, and it does everything for you. And in 2 hours and 33 minutes on my setting, I have a beautiful loaf of bread. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. I've got all of my ingredients out here, so let's make a loaf. I'll show you putting it together and putting it in my machine, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it comes out. And we will look to see if, because this starter had been fed a little bit more, if I get a little bit more air in my crumb, I will say you're not going to have those huge pocket holes like you might with a crusty bread. It's going to be more like a sandwich bread, which is that function for the Zojirushi. But like I said, it had a mild, nice flavor. It is a different flavor than if you didn't use the sourdough at all. So if you want it more sour, then I would suggest, and I will eventually try to do this as well, I just don't have time today, and the snow has melted, so I will not be trapped in my house any longer. So in the near future, I will try to do one on the dough function, let it rest overnight, and then crank it up and see how it does. But for the purpose of this video, this is about a quick one that anybody can get in their bread machine and get a nice loaf of bread out. And so that's what I'm doing. So come along and let's get going. Okay, so we have our 1 1/4 cup of water, filtered water. I did not heat this up because there is a preheat function in your Zojirushi, so you don't need to heat that up, okay? The next thing I'm going to put in here is my 1/2 cup of sourdough starter. I don't know if I mentioned the egg, but it does need an egg, and I will beat that up in just a minute. So we're gonna all right, and I'll have to feed this again, which I'll do in a few minutes. All right, so we're going to get our sourdough starter in here with our water. Now you may ask, why did I start with a kamut sourdough starter? Because kamut of the ancient grains has the least amount of gluten, and I have been gluten-free for like 10 years plus, and I was trying to reintroduce it to my system. And so I decided when I built my sourdough starter that I was just going to build it from water, filtered water, and kamut. And that's what I did, and it has been a very good starter. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just gonna, you see inside my little thing, I didn't put my paddles in yet because they can kind of get in the way. So what I did, so that this is kind of incorporated, was I'm just taking my little whisk. I'm not going real difficult or real strong, but I am kind of getting that sourdough in this water, because you don't want clumps, you want to smooth. Now this will mix it in there. But what I have found with this machine is, even if you're doing a regular loaf, doing this with the lecithin and your egg, it just seems to make for a better loaf of bread. Okay, that's just my opinion. All right, so the next thing we're going to put in is our olive oil. And I just keep this is a glass bottle that I got from Azure. I actually been buying my olive oil for bread making from the bread backers, but it's this huge metal container. It's hard to use, so I just refill this one. So we need 1/3 of a cup. And y'all, if you're interested in the bread backers, I'm not an affiliate. I've just been a customer for like 23 years. They have co-ops that go, I think, to most of the lower 48. So you could check out their co-op. I will tell you personally, I think that their grains are far better than the ones I got from Azure. I haven't ever used Pleasant Hill grain, so I can't speak to that, but I've just found the quality to be a little bit better. So now we're going to put 1/3 cup of honey. This honey I also get from the bread backers. So we're going to get that in there. And it's always good to do your oil first so you can get your honey to come out. And that way you don't over sweeten your. So I'm just trying to get that broke up. All right. And now I'm going to put in my egg, which I had already whisked up. Because this, I have found, makes a huge difference. If you just plop an egg in here, it sinks down in the middle when you bake it. And as long as I have whisked up that egg, I haven't had that issue again. All right, so we got that. So we'll move that. The next part is our salt. We're going to put 2 teaspoons of salt. And we'll bring that back, kind of stir it up. And then we're going to take our lecithin, and the reason you want to add this, I'm pretty sure it's optional, but it does make for a softer crumb. So I just think it's a game changer. Oops, that's the wrong bucket. That's my wheat bucket. Hold on. Here is the correct bucket. Now I will say this likes to clump, so I kind of, before I add the other, I want to get this one kind of, and this is why I said wait on putting your paddles in, because it's easier to maneuver in here for this, because these, I don't know what it is about this stuff, but it does like to clump. So if you kind of come at it a little at a time. And with your Zojirushi, this little measure, this measurer and the little cup comes with it, so you know. They're pretty handy. Yeah, see how it wants to clump? Okay, so if you want it to taste, have a stronger soured taste to it, another thing you could possibly do is just let this sit. Let it sit out for several hours and get happy, and then bake. I'll probably try that at some point as well. Because that sourness will come through stronger and stronger the longer it sits. So if you have the ability to do that, you can do that. You may also, you probably could program it, one of the programming cycles of the Zojirushi, to let it sit longer, because all we're going to do now is put our flour on top. Actually, we're going to put our paddles in. So I'm going to put my paddle in and push it down. So I got my paddles in. So what I'm going to do now is put my flour in. And so if you were to do that, like give it a longer preheat in your program, you did a program setting for that, again, it's just going to develop more flavor because this isn't going to mix. Until you put it on that setting, it's not going to mix. All right, so that's 2. I don't have enough flour ground, so I'm gonna use some of my all-purpose to finish up what I need. Which you can do that. You can mix flours. I could mill a different kind of flour if I wanted to. But I am trying to use this up. So that's what we're gonna do. And I can still feel really good about it because it has, the majority of it is freshly milled with all the parts. All right. And then we're gonna put 3/4 of a cup. So it's a total of 3 3/4. Okay, that looks about right. All right, then all we're gonna do, I gotta find my yeast, is I'm just gonna make a little well. And we're gonna put our yeast in the well, and that's what I'm saying. If you did a program so it sat in a preheat for a longer time, or you did a 3rd rise, you could probably do that as well. It will help develop more of a sour flavor. But again, for the purpose of making it soured at all and adding some of that benefit, we're gonna do this quick version, okay? So let's go over to the machine. Okay, so I just plugged up my machine. You're just gonna clamp that down into there. And I'm just gonna close it. And I'm gonna go through my course selection. I'm doing my main one that I do for my loaf, which is memory 1. You can do up to 3 different memory versions. And then you need to pick how dark you want your crust. Some people like their crust darker, some people like it lighter. I like mine medium, so I've verified that. And then all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit start. Now it also has a timer feature. You might be able to time it so it would start a little bit later and then do your memory number 1. You have to play around with that. I haven't done that yet. But yeah, so I'll show you. Well, I'll come back probably in about 3 hours because I don't like to take mine out. Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure the manual says to let it sit for about 30 minutes. Even after it's done, you just unplug it and then you can take it out. So that's typically what I like to do. And I will see you back in about 3 hours and I'll show you what our loaf of bread looks like.
So after you use your sourdough starter, you got to feed it. And I will tell you, I am using some all-purpose to feed, but before I did, I used the remainder of my freshly milled. Your sourdough starter will love you if you use freshly milled. It does better, but you got to feed it.
Okay guys, so this is my second loaf. It's finished up about 45 minutes ago. Zojirushi says you're supposed to leave your pan in for at least 30 minutes. You just unplug it. So I have, so let's get it out and see what it looks like. Okay, you can see this one actually has a few more air pockets than the one did yesterday. So it's cooked. It's really soft. So let me see. I cut on the lighter side because as you can see that's plenty dark, and that's typically what it looks like. Usually the top is more like this on the medium setting, but it was a little lopsided. So let's cut it. Let me taste it. You see the little holes? It's really good. So guys, I've had a moment to reflect, and I actually put some Kerrygold cheddar on it. It is so good. It's warm, it's really tasty. And I think I know what I really like better about this. Let me chew my food. When you make the original Zojirushi 2-pound loaf, like I showed you in my other video that a lot of you are watching, liking, commenting on, that loaf of bread, I got that recipe straight from Sue Becker's Red Cookbook. And of course, I also got my Zojirushi from the Bread Bakers. It is the one they recommended, and I love it, and I'm so glad I have it. However, when you make that loaf of bread, it tends to have a little bit of a sweetness to it, and yes, it has that honey in it. It's not a lot of honey, but it does have a tinge of a sweetness to it, which is probably why we like it with like almond butter and fruit spreads and stuff like that. This doesn't have that sweet tinge. It doesn't have a big sour taste, and it's super soft, which is really nice. It's like a really nice sandwich bread. I bet this will make a great tomato sandwich bread. But if you want to have like a turkey sandwich or a bologna sandwich or chicken salad or something, I feel like this is a better loaf with that little bit of sourdough in it, because it tastes to me more like a savory bread. Just my opinion and how I'm feeling about it. So anyway, I wanted to say that and give you that review. I hope you'll try it. If you do, tell me about it. I've seen a couple of you post like you've played around and done some of your own little recipes. So if you have any of those, share those with us as well, because I'm still learning in my machine. I just kind of was like a one-trick pony, and now I'm figuring some new things out. So anyway, thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.